Yeah, I usually like to walk around while talking to the camera, but two things. I noticed first that I make a lot of noise while I hold the camera. I am apparently touching the microphone. And two, I have unfortunately forgotten to charge my device, my tablet, so I need to leave it plugged in. So I'll try to confine my pacing to uh, the volume of space that the camera can capture, but I don't promise to do so. Anyway, tonight, I want to talk about two movies I've seen recently. Kind of just an unfocused discussion of them, my thoughts on them. And they're two movies that I think are the ideal two movies to review in a single video, which is Oldboy and the movie About Time, both of which I saw recently. So first, for the movie Oldboy, as I was going to go see it, the person selling the tickets asked me, he said something like, "Have you seen the original?" I admitted that I had. I saw the movie, and as I was leaving, that same guy said, "How'd you like it? Was it as good as the original?" And I said, "I liked it fine. It was about as good as the original." And that's an opinion that I was surprised to see was not shared by the majority of people who watched and reviewed the movie. And I think it's essentially similar to something I've said before in a previous video about Ender's Game. I mentioned how a lot of people like to say, things like, "Well, the movie wasn't as good as the book." Like, that's a common kind of complaint you'll hear about books that are adapted into film. And I feel like the reason people say that is because they want to come across as, the kind of cultured, intellectual individual who reads books and who prefers books. And so that's essentially similar to why people say, like, it wasn't as good as the original, because they want you to know that they've seen the original, right? Like, you want to be the kind of person who's seen, strange subculture Korean action films. And it's ironic that the ones you have seen are the most massively popular, like cliched, like if you've watched a Korean action film, it's probably like Oldboy or I Saw the Devil or something. So it's ironic that you would take pride in seeing what is a very massively popular kind of icon. And then, that you would try to act superior by, well, it wasn't as good as the original. And I genuinely think the remake was about as good as the original. I wasn't a huge fan of the original film. I found it really confusing and bizarre, both of which are probably due to the fact that the film was intended for a different cultural audience, by which I mean it was intended for a Korean person to view. I felt the confusion inherent in the original was largely ameliorated. The plot was pretty clear, still kind of strange, but an enjoyable movie. And I felt like they did a good job retaining the essential elements, minus the cutting out of a tongue, but the key story elements were there. And they likewise maintained, I felt, the kind of vicious action or the pace of the film that I think was the best part of the original. And like the clearest example of that is the fight scene from the original film, which is pretty well recreated in the remake, where it's the guy, Josh Brolin in the remake, come back to fight the people who imprisoned him. And there are like 30 guys who come at him with clubs and knives, and they stab him in the back at one point, and he just keeps on beating them all up over and over again. I think the scene is like probably something, even though I liked it, I thought it was well done, probably something that should have been left out or changed, um, due to the fact that it's essentially kind of a, I mean, the scene is unrealistic no matter where it occurs. Um, but it's kind of like a Korean conceit, maybe, that you would fight 30 guys and none of them would have a gun. Like, that's not going to come up if you're breaking out of a private American torture prison. One of those guys is going to carry a gun, and no matter how much you exercised in the past 20 years, you're going to get shot. In Korea, maybe it's slightly more believable that none of the 30 thugs would have a gun. And I say slightly, even though I'm aware that handguns are illegal in Korea. But so are private torture prisons. And if you're the kind of person who works at a private torture prison, then you probably have access to a handgun. And so even in Korea, you'd probably be carrying a gun. In the US, you almost certainly would be carrying a gun. And like, I would allow for, some kind of explanation like, well, this organization is so concerned with keeping people alive no matter what, that they don't allow their employees to carry guns just in case someone ever escapes, so that, none of the henchmen kill the guy. Like, I mean, maybe that's a believable explanation. But again, the kind of mind that is inclined towards being a security guard at a private torture prison, like, that guy is not going to pay attention when you're like, oh, and don't bring a gun to work. You're going to be like, why not? Oh, well, if someone ever escapes, we don't want you to kill him. We want you to, like, fight him with a stick. Be warned, though. He'll be in great shape. Like, I mean, I don't feel like that is going to carry. And again, like, the scene is inherently implausible in Korea or the United States because there are so many guys just sitting around a torture prison, waiting to get into a fist fight, and they've got nothing better than, like, what's the word for it? Those lights that break easily when you hit them on things, and like 2x4s, and one guy brought a knife or something like that. There was more than one knife. But anyway, unlikely. One scene I really did like from the film, though, my favorite scene in the film, was when Josh Brolin is in the prison, the hotel room prison, and he's just given up drinking, and he's seen his daughter, and he's committed to escaping and improving himself and so on, and, going to see his daughter or whatever, and we see him start to, like, exercise and work out and begin to become better, whatever it is he's doing. And he sits down on the bed listening to the exercise TV, and in his, in the corner of his vision, or you see from his field of view, and you see the bookcase full of encyclopedias, and you see him get, the glimmer of an idea in his eye. And because I was watching this in a theater, my thought was, I think obviously, that, he's about to, like, begin studying the encyclopedias and, like, build his mind as he's building the body, something like that. And so I thought it was very humorous to then see in the next shot, he's just doing, like, squats with the encyclopedias balanced on his hands, and just, using them as like a weight to exercise with. Which oddly, now that I've mentioned Ender's Game, I feel it's appropriate to return to it. One of the parts I really liked in the novel Ender's Game is when Ender joins, I believe it's Bonzo Madrid's army, and what is it? Bonzo says something like, there are 3 things you got to remember. I forget what they are, but he only says 2 things, and Ender internalizes that by saying, like, the lesson was clear. Math didn't matter. Only the game mattered. Only Bonzo's orders mattered. Only the battle game matters. And I think that's the same kind of lesson reiterated here. When Josh Brolin sees the encyclopedias, like the books, the knowledge, and recontextualizes that into a tool. Maybe recontextualize was the wrong word there. And no, maybe it was right. Anyway, recontextualizes that into a tool to, build his body. The only thing that matters to Josh Brolin in that scene is getting stronger, escaping, building his power. Although he might have been better served to attempt to build his mind, because I think it's a pretty obvious escape plan to, tunnel through the bricks, and even more obvious if you crawl into the escape tunnel you've just built, that you should take the things you want to bring, i.e. the letters, with you. Very dumb to reach the outside and be like, I should go back for the letters. No, you should have brought the letters with you. And you should have tried digging out of the hotel room before 20 years had elapsed. Pretty dumb. If Josh Brolin had been reading books instead of lifting them, might have improved the function of his mind to the extent that he would have been able to escape the pretty pitiable prison in which he was held for so long. Yeah, the ending of the film I have some complaints with as well. I understand it was, like a faithful, mostly faithful reproduction of the original. And that is actually my biggest problem with it. I feel like if you're going to remake a movie like this, then you need to take risks. Like, the reason Oldboy is an enjoyable film, the original Oldboy is an enjoyable film, is because it is taking risks. It is pushing the envelope a little. Like, with the incest plot and with the kind of the brutality of the action scenes. Like when I first saw the original Oldboy and that fight scene where he's got the hammer and all those guys and he gets stabbed in the back and is still beating people up, I was like, whoa, that was awesome. When I saw it in the remake, again, pretty faithful recreation, but it doesn't feel awesome because I've already seen it. It was better to see it on the big screen, I guess, but it was only technically better. It wasn't like when I saw it for the first time, it was kind of a paradigmatically better. It was like, I haven't seen anything like this. Like, I saw it for the first time on a small TV, but it was a kind of vicious, brutal, intense fight. And the remake failed to capture, the remake, was kind of by the numbers, I guess. It recreated those things, but it failed to capture the original essence. And I'm not saying like the original is, necessarily better, but I'm saying the original was good because it did new things. And if the remake wants to be good, it must also do new things. And it didn't really. It didn't take any risks, and so it didn't push the envelope at all. And so, maybe this is why, leaving the theater, you just think like they remade the original with American actors and actresses. Well, just one actress. Two actresses. Anyway. Yeah, so, like, what I would have liked to see maybe in the end, I don't know, I feel like, I can only watch movies and imagine how I would act in the character's position. And, like, I think again, maybe it is more of a Korean thing to, hear that, like, that attractive woman you just had sex with is your daughter, and then, like, ooh, cut out your tongue in rage or whatever it is, sadness or guilt or something, or in order to convince the madman not to tell your daughter. That's kind of a Korean thing. And so they took out the cutting out of tongue, which is okay. But I still feel like the desperation or the kind of manic intensity with which Josh Brolin is pleading with the villain to, like, just leave his daughter alone, that kind of thing. Like, oh, extent to which Josh Brolin is upset, I don't feel is maybe American is the right word, maybe appropriate to the culture. Again, like if it were me and I were in that situation, the bad guy would be like, and so did you figure out why I finally let you out after 20, and then I'd be beating him to death, and I'd be like, what were you saying? I don't care. Like, you imprisoned me for 20 years, I'm just going to kill you at the first opportunity. Except I probably wouldn't be punching him, I'd be like, yeah, so I figured out your riddle, and something like that would have been a little bit more sensible. Also, probably wise not to have used the cell phone the bad guy gave you. Understand, I guess, that Josh Brolin wouldn't think of that because he had been in a hotel room for the past 20 years. And his mind had probably atrophied since his company was like a rat and a portrait, and all he had was books to lift. But his friends should have thought of that. What's her name? Elizabeth Olsen or that guy from The Sopranos should have thought, maybe we'll use a different phone. Something like that. Probably wouldn't have helped. But, that is one thing that I like about the film, though, is that it is told from the perspective of people who are really just jerks. Like, it's not very often that you get a movie that's, kind of faithfully told from the just jerk's perspective. And they were all kind of unrepentant, except for Elizabeth Olsen. I guess she was fine. But Josh Brolin and the guy from The Sopranos were, just kind of unrepentant jerks who are on this adventure. And I like that kind of novel perspective. Probably that's the same as the original, although I had a really hard time understanding the plot with the original. But I trust it was essentially this. And the difficulties I had in understanding the original are not helped by the fact that I saw it years ago in college, and I'm just trying to recollect, what subtitles I managed to read. Anyway, as I was saying, the ending, I feel like they should have been more bold with it. Tried to do something else, take it in a different turn than the original, innovate a little, do something better. Possible ending I think that would have been a bit risky would be like, the bad guy reveals what's happened, and, well, now I've told you everything. The bad guy shoots himself in the head, dies. The final scene should have just been like Josh Brolin and Elizabeth Olsen, passionately embracing, and the camera catches Josh Brolin's eye over the back of Elizabeth Olsen's shoulder, and he just kind of smiles or grins at the camera. Cut to black. I thought I would find that a much more humorous, much more, maybe humor wasn't the tone that the movie was trying to go for, but the movie is trying to be it's obviously trying to be like a fun action movie. And maybe fun is essentially the right word. Like, it's not a serious movie. It's just like a bizarre action kind of film. Makes me think of one of my favorite movies of all time is the movie Crank. And like Oldboy is, a very pale, faint imitation, but it's the same kind of thing. It's, like action turned up higher than is believable, and like complicated story elements turned down low. I guess the story of Oldboy is kind of complicated, but it's not really that complicated, and it's handed to you, piece by piece, and really in such a format, the same format that Crank is. You have to go to position X now and kill people, and then go to the next position and kill people, and it's the same kind of thing. But anyway, my point with relating it to the movie Crank is that Crank is, daring enough to try something wild and fun. Uh, if the people who made Crank were remaking Oldboy, I would not put it past them to have an ending scene like Josh Brolin conceals the fact that he's Elizabeth Olsen's father, and they just go on secretly in incest. Like, that would be something they could plausibly have. And in my mind, it would make the movie more enjoyable because it would be like a crazy, unexpected, kind of weird turn. And that's what I'm looking for in a film like Oldboy. Other possible. I mean, you could go farther with it. You could be like, the bad guy. Well, now I've told you everything. Shoots himself in the head, goes down. Josh Brolin, reuniting with Elizabeth Olsen, they hug and so on. And then, the screen goes black and the screen fades back in, and the camera's from, the eye view, and it looks back across the hotel room prison and sees all the old familiar sights, and then, the camera will ascend up to show us the figure in the bed, and it's Elizabeth Olsen, and she's imprisoned there for some reason, and then cut to Josh Brolin in a casino, and he's just like drinking and playing games or something. Like, that would have been an even more bizarre, weird ending. What would that mean? But I don't know, something like that. Or maybe just like the final scene should have been Josh Brolin, taking a drink in the hotel room. I actually don't remember if it was. If it was, I take it back. But something to innovate, to do more, to be a little bit more exciting, and to differentiate from the original, which I think it largely failed to do, and I don't think that's a very good thing. The other film I've seen recently was the movie About Time. Which, I was thinking about this when I was in the shower this morning, just about kind of how frustrated I am with the characters in that movie. One, you're handed, this insane superpower that can travel through time, and they use it to such ill effect. Well, I shouldn't say ill effect. That would imply they're doing something bad with it. They use it to such poor effect. And indeed, at the end of the film, the main character gives us this kind of patronizing moral that the best thing he can do with his superpower is to not do anything at all. Reminiscent of that Futurama quote, like, when you do things right, people won't know that you've done anything at all. Time traveling would solve all of the problems for all of the characters in the film, except those problems that are very huge in moral importance that they don't address, which I'll get to. There's a scene where the main character meets his elderly and ill father, and his father is dying of cancer, and his father says something dumb like, I think it was the cigarettes, but I can't go back in time to stop smoking. And the reason he can't go back in time to stop smoking is because I guess he started smoking before the main character was born. And so if the father were to return in time to before the main character's birth to stop himself from smoking, then he would undo the birth of the main character. And, that's it. That's all his father tried. Like, well, can't stop smoking, guess I'll die. I was under the impression his father was like a college professor or something. Maybe I've already forgotten what his real profession was in the film, but that is so dumb. Such a limited imagination. Here's an idea. Why don't you, step one, win millions of dollars in the lottery? Step two, make billions of dollars by investing your seed money intelligently. And by intelligently, I mean time-travelingly. What stocks went up the most today? Okay. Time time to invest, that kind of thing. Once you're a billionaire, you then, in parallel, establish an institution to do cancer research for, say, 10 years. And, as I said, in parallel, you attend medical school yourself in order to gain enough knowledge that you can go to the Cancer Research Institute at the end of the 10-year period and say, okay guys, fill me in, everything you found. And even more importantly, you'd have to be doing this like at regular weekly meetings with them, but even more importantly, you'd be like, tell me what's not working, tell me where. And so they'd keep you apprised of what was working, what wasn't working. They'd be like, well, we have this really interesting area, this really interesting avenue of research. Should we investigate it? And you'd be like, yeah, put everything into that. And then, at the end of the 10-year period, you'd be like, well, okay, I know what you guys know now. I'm going back in time to the day I founded the Cancer Research Institute, and I'm just going to brief them on everything I know now as an experienced cancer researcher with 10 years expert, insight into the field. And then they would start out ahead of where the previous group started at, the previous timeline, the alternate timeline group started at. And likewise, you could, this time around, they'd be like, we want to focus all of our development, all of our research into this area. And they'd be like, no, that's not going to work. Do it into this next area. Let's investigate drug X. No, let's investigate drug Y. Rewind. Drug Z. Rewind. You would essentially have infinite funding and infinite time. So the idea that you are somehow limited to, darn, I started smoking before the birth of my son, that's insane. That's ridiculous. Obviously, that is not a hard limit for you. And it's even crazier that they have the ability to bring other people back through time with them. And they almost never take advantage of that. The main character wants, and I was actually confused as to what was happening when I was watching this. The main character brings his sister back in time to a party or something, because that's the one digression point he can imagine, and tries to get her to change her life. He returns to the present and discovers that his daughter has been erased, right? When he changed the timeline, he accidentally erased his daughter. So he has to go undo that and make his sister undo the car crash and recover his daughter. But what's bizarre about this, a number of things are bizarre about this. Why wouldn't you just go back an hour before your sister's car crash and be like, let me come get you, sis. Or just go back a year and start her on the path towards reconciliation. Or, well, maybe you want to get her, maybe you just suddenly get the urge to see your sister live a healthy life when you've kind of ignored it for the past your entire life, your and her entire life. So sure, maybe it's fine to go back in time to that party and try to set her on the right track then. But yeah, the issue with accidentally deleting your child, when you accidentally delete your daughter, return to the present and see you have a son now, then the main character just is kind of like, oops, better delete the son. And he never stops to realize that whatever moral worth might attach to a child is equally attached to his son as it is to his daughter. And so when he's already realized, he's already deleted his daughter and realized his son, and so he, undoes the timeline with his son to restore his daughter, which I think is bizarre, and that he never, bats an eye at a pretty ponderous moral issue. And even then, you know, having realized that traveling back in time prior to a child's conception will remove that child from the timeline. Having realized that, he never makes, and this is what I refer to as, you know, the much bigger moral problem, he never makes the fairly common sense jump, right, to any time I go back in time, I am deleting people's children, right? Like, if you either delay or facilitate any act of conception for any people, you know, through the butterfly effect, you are deleting people's children. Oops. But he doesn't really care about that. He doesn't really even notice it. And it's strange to me that he doesn't, because, like, I mean, like, when I was watching the film, it was staring me in the face. Like, I can't go back in time past the birth of my own child. And I was like, no, past the birth of anyone's child. Like, if it matters that your kid is going to be deleted, then it matters that my kid is going to be deleted, right? Yeah, so he never really thinks about that, which I think is dumb. I think he should either be fine with deleting his own children, or concerned about deleting everyone's. But maybe that's just me. Yeah. Another kind of moral failing on the main character's part is that he conceals his superpower for no reason. And, like, I mean, some superheroes have reasons, although they're usually kind of poor. They have reasons to keep their identity secret. This guy doesn't have any reason. Like, it's not like his power is going to stop working if he shows it to people. In fact, he does show it to his sister. Yeah, and it's not like he has villains he's got to worry about killing his loved ones, right? He's done nothing with his life, so nobody hates him. And what I'm getting at is, you know, maybe it would be nice for him to share his superpower with his wife or girlfriend, with Rachel McAdams. Because, you know, she might benefit from having time travel, or knowing that time travel was an option for her family. But he doesn't share that with her. Instead, he just kind of uses that to beguile her, which is something, you know, kind of another moral issue I have with the film, is that